Back on Friday, in one of the last topics I talked about in my random edition of my Topics on My Mind live stream was about the Retrobits Super Retrocade. Now, to go on record, I do have one on order and it should be arriving this week. But the reason I bring this up is due to the fact that one of the questions I asked about the Retrocade was whether or not Retrobits was aware of what they had done. Basically allowing people to add more games via SD card in the SD card slot on the console. And to answer that, now that I think about it, I believe Retrobits was aware. They just didn't come out and say anything, or they secretly kind of told people they were able to do this when they promoted the system. And the reason I say they may have told people to do this in their own way was because of the way they promoted it. They said that the SD card slot was to save games or transfer games. Key word there, transfer games. And I think that was Retrobit's way of saying you could add more. They weren't going to come out and say you couldn't or you can't or straight out tell you could. They basically secretly in their own way saying and you can by saying transfer. Now the reason I bring this up is because of the fact that I'm sure Retrobits was aware at the time of the release of the Retrocade console that Arcade1Up around the same time was entering the video game business via a nostalgic point of view by basically introducing reproductions of actual arcade cabinets, but in this case the kind you can have at home. And if you wanted to have that actual arcade experience, all you had to do was buy an additional riser, as they call it, put the cabinet on said riser, and there you go. The reason I bring all this up to get to the point is mainly I think Retrobits did indeed know what they were doing. Not only were they aware that both they and Arcade1Up both were officially licensed by the same publishers to distribute or have access to the same actual legitimate arcade cabinet games, I should say, that they were going to put on the consoles. But I think Retrobits knew that the one thing they could do to kind of get a leg up on the huge competition in front of them was to allow people to add more games via SD card. And sometimes these games could be from consoles that were probably not going to have cabinets be released by Arcade1Up, and thus that would give them a huge leg up. Now you might say, well, that doesn't make any sense, Brian. Well, when you think about it, maybe it does. I mean, think about it. If you're Retrobits and you realize you have this smaller console with 90 plus games officially licensed and pre-installed in there, and most of them are legitimate arcade games that you would play on an actual arcade cabinet, and then you hear about this one company coming in and basically saying, hey, we're going to be doing these reproductions of authentic arcade cabinets, and we're going to have more than just one game on them for you guys to play at home. You can't tell me that Retrobits wasn't aware of what was going on, and they probably realized, hey, I know how we can get a leg up. Let's allow people to use the SD card slot to add more games. Now, Retrobits didn't have to do that. What Retrobits could have done is prevent that from happening. They could have just made the SD slot on the back of the console just for the fact you could save games and that's it. Or if you wanted to transfer the games on the console to, let's say, your computer, that's fine too. But the point I'm getting at is I'm in the belief, guys, and this is the honest truth. I am in the belief that Retrobits knew what they were doing. They were aware of what they were doing. Because like I said, when they advertised that you could save games and transfer games via SD card, I think they knew what they were doing. Because as I said, I think by adding in the words transfer games at the end of promoting the system, that was their way of saying you could add more. But again, they're not going to come out and say that because they know if they come out and say, oh, the SD card slot? Yeah, you could use it to save games or dump more ROMs onto the console via SD card. You know, if they would have came out and said, oh, you could add more games via SD card, yeah, that probably wouldn't have sounded good in the eyes of a lot of people, because it's basically like saying, yeah, go ahead, add more games. possibly put your system at risk. Because there's one thing one of the people on YouTube talked about when they were mentioning the ability to do this. I think it was John Briggs or John Riggs. You know, he basically said, look, you know, now I don't know if he was joking or being sarcastic or whatever, but he basically said, look, you're gonna kind of be doing this at a risk. Like, you're gonna take a chance doing this because it may work. Most of the times it will, and it may not work and may damage your system for all we know. But again, I think he may have been sarcastic and maybe kidding. I'm not really sure. But the point I'm getting at, is I truly believe Retrobits was aware of what was going to happen, and I think they wanted it to happen because they probably knew about the fact, or probably heard about the fact, that Arcade1Up was going to be entering the video game business via a nostalgic point of view with these reproductions of actual arcade cabinets that now people could take home and play instead of going to an arcade to play. I think they were very much aware of that, which is why they added that addition. That's why they added the addition of being able to put more games onto the Retrocade. Now, I've never played the Retrobit Generations, the previous incarnation of the Retrocade, but as far as I know, I don't see anybody talking about the Retrobit. The Retrobit, I think, was more along the lines of just the pre-installed games officially licensed, but that was it. Here, though, you have an SD card slot, and you have the ability to add games. So, honest to God, in my opinion, I think Retrobits was aware of what was going on, and they allowed it to happen. And when they promoted it by saying, hey, you could save games or transfer games via SD card, the last two words there, transfer games, in my opinion, was code for you can add more games if you like. So, yeah, I think Retrobits was aware. And did this kind of help in the slow selling and maybe slow decline of some of the Arcade1Up cabinets? Possibly, because one of the major selling points for any console is the price. And I'm sure Retrobits did what they could to come out and say, yeah, you can get these same legitimate arcade games that you're going to get on these cabinets, but for $200+ less than what you'd be paying for the cabinets. That's one selling point that they probably threw out there. And then again, they probably, when they would promote this, like I said, also probably brought up the fact that, yeah, you'll be able to get if you want to, you can play these in HD. And on top of that, we have an SD slot on the back where you can save your game or transfer a game as well, or transfer your game as well. And I think, again, the key word of transfer games was the code of saying you could add more. But as I mentioned, they couldn't just come out and say, oh, you could add more games, because that may have not looked good for them. So yeah, I think in a sense, even as of now, as of today, they did kind of, and still are kind of contributing to the decline of some of the sales of the Arcade1Up. It may not seem like that at all, because there are people that will go out and buy these Arcade1Ups as collector editions to kind of keep around the house or keep in their rooms or in their game rooms and play them whenever they want, or just have them there for display. And that's fine too. I mean, I still have plans when the money comes around, if it's still around, to get the Ninja Turtles arcade cabinet in my house. How that works, how that's going to be, that's up in the air right now. But it's either going to be in this room or it's going to be in my room. That's a fact. But the point is, I still plan to get one. But as of right now, if the Retrocade is going to be able to kind of fill that void, you know, being able to have actual arcades at the palm of your hands that, you know, through the Arcade1Up would cost you a little bit more or a lot more, you know, then so be it. And here's the thing, I think Retrobits also knew what they would do and also were aware of what was going on, because they know a lot of people don't have the room in their house to, you know, get these cabinets. Not a lot of people have that ability. I mean, if they did, that's great, but most times they don't. I mean, when you look at it, this room I'm in my room as well, does not have the room, unless like we take a few things out. You know, it doesn't have the room to be able to, you know, hold an arcade cabinet by Arcade1Up. So you know, obviously Retrobits knew what they were doing in that manner. But yeah, I think they were aware of what was going on, honestly, guys. I think Retrobits was aware of what they were doing. They knew what, you know, they were aware of it, I should say. They knew what they were doing. And honestly, I do think, in a sense, even now, they're kind of contributing to the slow selling of some of these consoles. That, in my opinion, is the absolute truth. They're kind of contributing to the slow selling of these cabinets, not console, but these cabinets, by allowing people to get some at $200 less, or over $200 less, with the ability to add more games. Now, the catch-22 is some of these games that you would add as ROMs onto your SD card and play on the Retrocade, or plan to play on the Retrocade. You know, the catch-22 is not all of them will work. Some will, some won't. The major test for me, if I try this out, is the Bunny Rabbit, Sally Acorn Hack, and the Sonic the Hedgehog games, as well as maybe Fighting is Magic, which is the My Little Pony game. See if those work, and if, well, they do, that's great. If only the Sally and Bunny hacks and the Sonic games work, along with the other ROMs I have work, then that's great too. So yeah, though, in my opinion, like I said, I think Retrobits was aware. They knew what they were doing. And I think, in a sense, even as we speak, they kind of are helping with the decline of Arcade1Up. Now, I want to see Arcade1Up succeed, which obviously is what they want to see as well, because they wouldn't be bringing out now portable games that you play on what looks to be Sega Genesis-like controllers, or modified Sega Genesis controllers. They wouldn't be going that route if they didn't want to try to succeed where they're probably not succeeding as much as they would hope for. But it's just my opinion. It's just my opinion that I think Retrobits was aware. I think they were aware, they are aware, and what's going on with the Retrocade, by allowing, you know, consumers the ability to add more games via SD card, is kind of contributing to the slow sales of the Arcade1Up cabinets. But again, it's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think they are contributing to the slowdown of sales when it comes to the Arcade1Up cabinets? Or do you think the Arcade1Up cabinets and Arcade1Up itself is going to outdo the Retrocade and Retrobits? Let me know down below. Comment if you like, and I will talk to y'all later.